Welcome to Fractional Futures, the essential podcast for CEOs, investors, and senior marketing executives looking to unlock the power of fractional marketing leadership. I'm Paul Mills, your guide on this journey, where me and my special guests uncover how this innovative leadership model is reshaping the business landscape. Whether you're a business leader looking to build a competitive advantage, an investor seeking to enhance the value of your portfolio, or a senior marketing executive considering a fractional career, this podcast is for you. We'll share expert insights, provide actionable strategies, and explore real-world success stories to help you leverage fractional marketing leadership for maximum impact. Tune into Fractional Futures and discover how to revolutionize your business and career. Hello, and welcome to Season 2 of Fractional Futures, where in each episode, I'm speaking to fractional leaders across the globe to get their perspectives on how the fractional leadership model is being embraced by the business landscape. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by Brooke. I'm going to probably get this wrong, but Janousek.
That is correct. Bravo.
who's a fractional CMO. So hi, Brooke. Welcome to the show.
Hi. Thank you so much for having me.
And I did get your surname wrong, but it's probably more the American pronunciation. But is it from Czech? Is that your heritage? Czech
It
name?
is. That is a great, yes, it's Czech Republic. And if I was over there, they would pronounce it Janacek, but the American way is Janousek. You did beautifully.
Oh, thank you. You're very kind. So, Brooke, before we jump into all things fractional, can you tell our listeners a little bit about your background before you came into the fractional world?
Absolutely. Well, immediately before I started my fractional business, I was the SVP of brand for a franchisor called Liberty Tax. So in America, we pay income tax, and there are tax preparers out there. So it was a franchise business that I think we had 1,100 or so franchisees. So I was working there immediately prior to starting my business. But overall, I have about 25 years experience in marketing, and it's been a pretty even split between working at ad agencies and then working in-house for brands. And I've worked on some great brands, worldwide brands like Disney, GE, Toro, and then there's a local brand in the States called Sonic, which is a drive-in restaurant where you can have burgers and shakes and things like that. So I worked on that account as well.
How did you discover the fractional model? Why did it appeal?
Yes, I am going to be very honest that this was never on my career path. It was never, I definitely write down all of my goals. I have vision board for my career. And ever since I was in an ad agency, I said, I'm going to become a CMO. And I knew that. And that was what I wanted in my heart of hearts. And I didn't even know this was an option, to be honest. And while I was at Liberty Tax, I must give credit to the CEO at the time. He's the one that sort of put this idea in my head. So I ended up resigning from that role. And during the resignation process, the CEO said, well, is there anything I can do to keep you? And I said, no, unfortunately not. And he said, okay, can I retain you as a fractional CMO to finish out your projects? And I was like, I don't even know what that means. He goes, well, it's essentially a consultant. And I said, sure. It didn't even occur to me. And then I ended up telling a couple other people that I had resigned and that I was thinking of what I was going to do next. And in my mind, I was just going to go find another full-time role at another company. And they started asking me, well, if you have free time, can we hire you as a consultant? And by the end of the week, I had 5 clients, which I know is an anomaly. I know that is not, I don't want to give anybody any false pretense that that's going to be that easy. But once I got under that contract with these other clients, I realized I think I'm going to give this a go. And here we are almost 3 years later, and I've been successfully running this business.
And yeah, I wouldn't say you're an anomaly because that sounds wrong, but certainly for most of the fractional CMOs that I've spoken to, very, very few of them, certainly in the UK, have had the luxury of jumping straight into client work when transitioning from the corporate role. So that's very lucky. So in terms of your transition, I guess you had more luck than many coming across. But in terms of that transition, what did you have to overcome on a personal basis or a financial basis to come into this career?
It's a great question. And to be totally honest, on a personal basis, I really struggled with, and I continue to struggle with, what is my identity professionally? I struggle with, I've bestowed this title upon myself. And so do people think that I've truly earned it? I struggle with if I want to go back to corporate, am I an attractive candidate? Because now I have this 3-year quote gap on my resume where I've been self-employed. Personally, I also struggle with keeping boundaries. There's really no boundaries now. My lines have been blurred between personal and professional. I work from home. There is no commute back to home from the office. And so I find myself working a lot longer than normal. So personally, there have been some realizations, but also the freedom and the flexibility that has come with it has been incredible. Financially, again, I don't want to paint this rosy picture. It's very up and down when you're on your own, regardless if you're a consultant or and you're working very specifically in social media or graphic design as a freelancer. This is very feast or famine sometimes. And so we really do ride the waves of the economic season, especially in the States. And there are times where I wonder if I'm going to have a client the next month. And then it always ends up working out. And I've just had to be more disciplined with saving, to be honest, to weather those drier spells.
Yeah, totally right. And I've experienced that feast and famine cycle as well, and it's incredibly difficult. In terms of your coping mechanisms for dealing with those troughs, what do you do to fill out that time until the income's coming in again?
Yes, I learned something very early on. I used to do project based work. And as I evolved through my tenure as a fractional CMO, I realized I can't make that much impact in less than 90 days, especially at the scope of what they're asking me to do. So I've mitigated that by saying we have a 3-month minimum commitment. So at least I will always have a 3-month runway. And then I do pick up project work from time to time if I need to fill in the gaps. I have also started speaking, doing public speaking. And so I kind of fill in the gaps there and have learned also to diversify the revenue stream. So as a fractional CMO or fractional CFO or whatever discipline you're in, I would say probably 90% of your income is going to come from those consultant type engagements. And I've really tried to say, all right, I actually want to dial that back to maybe 70% and then get some income from either conducting workshops or doing public speaking. So I just don't have all my eggs in one basket.
Before they become fractional, any marketers who are already in a corporate role and are thinking about moving across into this fractional or portfolio work style, I always recommend have at least 6 months salary behind you before you take the plunge, because if you don't have that financial backing, it's very difficult to pick up work straight away unless serendipity comes and bites you and you've got 1 or 2 clients to start off with. But for many people that's not the case. So is that something you'd advocate, having several months salary behind you?
Absolutely. And that was one detail I didn't disclose in the beginning. But when I had made the decision to resign from that role, I had looked at my bank account and knowing that it was probably going to take me honestly 5 to 6 months to find another job. I did the calculation and saw, okay, I have this much in savings. I can be okay. And so, yes, you're spot on with that. And even now, I try and once I get paid, I always put a percentage aside for taxes and I always put a percentage aside for savings and then I pay myself. So I do have more of a runway to work with.
No, that's good advice. And in terms of the US, from the UK, we're looking across the pond, and we see the fractional leadership model, if you call it that, pretty well established. In terms of fractional CMOs, is that lagging behind the other C-suite roles in the US, or is it as established as, let's say, a fractional CFO or fractional CTO?
That's a great question. And I will say it probably 10 years ago, I was exposed to this fractional term. And I was working at an ad agency that was owned by a private investor. And so he decided to put in his own finance team. And so I remember walked in one day and met this gentleman and I said, my name's Brooke. And he introduced himself and he said, I'm a fractional CFO for you. I said, what does that mean? So he explained it to me and I thought, wow, that's, I'd never heard that term before. So I do believe fractional CFO paved the way for this wave. I feel like fractional CMO is just now starting to really take off in the States. I'm fortunate enough that I was a little ahead of the curve. And now, especially in the climate, there's a lot of layoffs, but they're laying off very high level executives. So now we see that wave of talent entering the fractional space. And honestly, it's a great move, especially if you have that tenure on your resume and you can offer that executive expertise. It's a great opportunity for brands that maybe couldn't afford a full-time CMO or CFO or CHRO to hire somebody now and get that executive level talent at a fraction of the cost.
And what sort of companies in the US are embracing the fractional CMO? Are there any particular sectors where it's more appealing? Are the more traditional sectors like professional services, manufacturing, are they picking up on it?
I think first and foremost, a lot of startups are picking up on it again because they can get that really high level expertise at a fraction of the cost. They're not going to be able to afford, the six-figure salaries that the CMOs are asking for. So, a cautionary tale to fractional CMOs and considering that, just also know startups don't have a lot of runway with cash either. So, I always look to work with a startup that has a couple rounds of funding. So I know that they have some runway. I also see, in particular, the franchising industry really embracing it, especially if they're an emerging brand. So, again, they're an emerging brand that may not have huge staff yet, but they might have a marketing manager or a marketing coordinator, and they need that strategic oversight to come in. So, I'm seeing that readily adopted. And then I also think in the tech space, you see a lot of SaaS companies leaning into this model as well.
Fantastic. And in terms of pitching yourself, not just yourself as Brooke, but pitching yourself as a fractional CMO to the market, what's the biggest misconception about this leadership model? What are the sort of objections you hear back from business owners?
I think because of the influx of talent, and there are some people that will label themselves as a fractional CMO, CTO, whatever, and might not have the years of experience that really do require you to to be able to use that title. And so I think there is a cautionary tale to brands when they're looking to hire these types of C-suite executives to really make sure and vet out that they have the tenure and have gone through some of those things. They understand how to manage a budget. They've managed team members before. They have, gone through some of those difficult conversations of maybe hiring and firing individuals. Those are things that you just accumulate over time. And so I think sometimes the misconception is, oh, they've bestowed this title upon themselves. Are they really qualified?
And on that, sort of moving on, if in your opinion, do you think there's a certain age where it's inappropriate to pitch yourself as a fractional CMO? So
Mhm.
let's say there's someone who's just come out of university, been in a role 2 or 3 years, they've cottoned onto this fractional CMO work style, and they think, oh, that's me, I'm going to do that. Is that a wise move, or do you have to have so many years experience?
And yeah, I was going to say, I probably wouldn't categorize it by age, but more about the experience because there are some incredibly talented and experienced individuals in their, mid 30s that have been at the helm of major brands. So I think it's more about what is the experience and how many years of experience do you have? And again, what did you do in those years of experience? Did you manage a brand? Did you manage a team? Were you part of a merger and acquisition? Like these are all things that build character and build your experience. I will also say if there is somebody that's just out of school and maybe they have been in the field for 2 or 3 years and they decide they want to go out on their own, there's no harm in going out on your own, but call yourself a consultant instead. I think you really do have to, again, as a brand, if you're listening and trying to determine who to hire, consultant usually is very niche and specialized in a discipline. And then if you get up to more of the fractional level, it's usually somebody that has been on an executive team before, has had that type of leadership, and has that oversight to the strategy is really what you're looking for. And so that's what I would caution brands against.
No, absolutely. I think you're right there. And in terms of the biggest misconception, you spoke there about the differences between being a marketing consultant and a fractional CMO. What's the biggest misconception about the fractional model? Is there
Mhm.
one thing you have to keep reminding business owners or peers about this?
Yeah, I think. And I wrote a post about this on LinkedIn. I think the difference on the consulting side, you're usually hired again for a very niche talent. So I'm just going to use the example. Maybe you're a social media consultant. So then that's the scope of your work. It's maybe project based. On the fractional side, now you are involved in potentially managing some team members or giving that leadership to a smaller marketing team. And I think the misconception sometimes too is the lines get blurred of, and this has happened to me, all of a sudden now I'm treated as an employee, and so that becomes to me a boundary setting thing to say, okay, I'm not one of your true employees. I want to be able to do some of these things, but we probably need to rescope then if or let's talk about full-time employment.
Yeah, and you raise an interesting point there, because I think one of the important things to get right as a fractional CMO, it's that integration into the business, isn't it? Because you're acting as the chief marketing officer for
Mhm.
that organization, although it's on a contract basis
Mhm.
and a part-time basis at that. So how do you integrate yourself in the businesses, bearing in mind there is that boundary between,
Mhm.
you're not an employee, you're a contractor,
Mhm.
but you need to be sufficiently integrated into the systems, the culture, operations to really deliver. How do you make that happen?
Yeah, that's a great question. I've had a wide range of clients where had to integrate very deeply into the organization with the team, and then some where there wasn't a team in place. But I would say I do that first and foremost. If there is a team in place, I make sure that I meet everybody on that team. I understand what their challenges are. How can I help them overcome the challenges? And a lot of times, internal teams do like the outside voice coming in because they're like, yes, we've been saying this forever and they won't listen to us. And now all of a sudden, this impartial third party comes in and I say something, and the CEO is like, yes, go ahead and do that. So, you build trust right there, and you're an advocate for the team. I think that's important. One line that I draw: I do not sign contracts on behalf of the client. So if I will help identify an agency partner, for example. I will vet that agency partner, but at the end of the day, and I make the recommendation, at the end of the day, I will not sign that contract. I'm not the employee, so I don't have signatory rights. So I think that's one distinction. And then if there isn't a team, I still make sure I integrate deeply into the organization by understanding business objectives. I want to form relationships cross functionally. So I make sure I meet with sales. And if, depending on the industry, if there's any sort of implementation team or training team, I make sure I meet with all of them, and I really want to be seen as part of the team. Even though I'm a remote employee and I might not see them every single day, I want to be viewed as part of the team.
And in terms of, I guess, your operational activities with your clients, are you purely remote? Are you like a virtual fractional CMO, if you know what I mean? Or are there clients where you actually go on site?
I do go on site. I make sure that I meet everybody in person at least once at the beginning of the relationship. But for a majority of the time, yes, I am remote. But I just onboarded a new client and I made sure that I went down there for 3 days. I did sales calls with the sales team. I wanted to see how they were interacting with customers. I sat with the customer service team, listened to phone calls, went out to dinner with the marketing team. So I really make sure, especially at the beginning, as part of my onboarding, as I meet everybody in person. I just think no matter what, you still need that human connection, that face to face, so you can build that trust and again achieve that, hey, I'm part of the team mentality amongst everybody.
Yeah. And you mentioned a moment ago about, when you come onto the client, whether it's remotely or in person, the teams think, oh yeah, there's that new voice, that fresh, independent perspective, which kind of unlocks things. But on the flip side, there might be some people in the existing marketing team thinking, oh, this is, Brooke's a bit of a threat here. Do you see that? How do you counter that slightly negative attitude to a fractional coming in and taking charge?
Yes, that unfortunately hasn't happened a lot. I mean, maybe one time, but I think that could happen at any job too, any full-time job. I've been in roles where I've come in and there have been internal candidates that I beat out for that role and I experienced tension with them. I've always, eventually ended up winning them over, but I think that that is not just exclusive to the fractional role. You do hear like, back in the 80s, consultant had a bad term. Everybody thought they were like these guys in the suits that rolled in and with their briefcases and just sat and wrote notes and then sent you a large bill. I think that that perception has changed a little bit. But I think first and foremost is just, hey, I'm here to help. How can I help you? What challenges are you experiencing? Please help, let me know how I can help you overcome them. And that goes a long way.
Yeah, no, that's good advice. And in terms of if there's any owner managers listening to this show and they're thinking about bringing on a fractional CMO into their organization, so they're sort of undecided, what advice would you give to that CEO who's thinking about bringing someone on board?
Yeah, so I would say you've probably been thinking about it for a while if you need to level up the marketing department, the finance department, whatever. Are you seeking some sort of leadership that you might not be getting from the current organization? And really look at your team and say this person has potential. I just need to get them to the next level and they need a little bit of counsel. And I love that a lot of CEOs are very self aware to say, hey, I'm not the one to provide that counsel, but let me bring in somebody who can. So I think you'll know if you're ready is if you have a team that's hungry to grow, that is looking for some leadership in this specific discipline that you as a CEO can't provide, and that you do have the budget to pay them a reasonable salary, but also knowing, hey, I know what it takes to hire somebody at this level and I can't do that full time, but guess what? I'm going to get them at a fraction of the cost. I don't have to pay benefits. I don't have to pay retirement, things like that. So I think looking at that and then also having an idea of maybe some specific areas that need focus would help.
But I think one of the beauties of this fractional leadership model is that you don't have to hire just one fractional in the same discipline. You could have two or three fractional CMOs at the same time, focus on different elements of marketing. Have you been in a situation where that's happened, where it's been you and someone else leading the marketing charge?
I have not, but it's interesting. I am in a situation right now where I am the fractional CMO and there's a fractional CFO. And so that's
Right.
really fun. And then she and I have formed such a good relationship that now we are pitching another client together. So that's really cool how that works out. I have been brought into a situation where there's a CMO in place and then they said, hey, I just need help. Like, I am drowning. I have so much, and I just need somebody that has the same level of thinking. I don't have to explain anything to them. I can just hand you projects. So, in the scenario you brought up, no, we both weren't fractional, but there was a CMO in place, and I was here just to be like the right hand. And I loved that arrangement as well.
I loved what you said about your relationship, friendship with the fractional CFO, because traditionally in the in-house corporate setting, the CMO and the CFO aren't always best buddies, are they? They're often at loggerheads because the CMO wants more budget, the CFO says no, and it happens quite a lot. And there's lots of articles and blogs on that. But it's interesting. Maybe on this in the fractional space, maybe they will become best buddies because they're operating in the same work style, and they have to collaborate more deeply because they're both got the same end goal in sight, which is to grow the business.
Right. And I know who to make best friends with. I tell you what, anytime I start a new role, whether it's full time or fractional, I go straight to the CFO. I want to be friends with them because you're right. We are just opposing on most of our beliefs of how money should be spent. But if we can respect where each other's coming from, it makes a beautiful relationship.
Uh, Brooke, in terms of the fractional leadership model, just looking at it from a helicopter point of view here, is fractional leadership here to stay? And where do you think it would be in 5 years' time?
Ooh, that's a good question.
It's a big one, isn't
It is a
it?
big one. Um, I would say I think that it's here to stay. I don't know at what capacity because I don't know how the economy is going to turn around here in the States where there could be a chance that everybody's going to start hiring again and people start going back to work. But already we're 4 years into post pandemic where people are seeing how comfortable and flexible it is to have these roles where you work from home. And so I do think that it's here to stay. I just don't know at what capacity.
Interesting. Yeah, well, it's going to be very interesting to see where it goes, and particularly, I think the UK is catching up with the US because I think the US
Absolutely.
has kind of set the precedent, and we're quickly catching up. And I know the Far East. I've spoken to people in Australia, New Zealand, Singapore in the last couple of weeks, and they're saying they're catching up with Europe. So I think everyone will get to a point where there's kind of a baseline norm. But yeah, it will be interesting. I think it's certainly here to stay. I think it's a competitor to the traditional 40-hour working week, and I think it gives employers the choice to offer flexibility by hiring fractional experts, C-level, whoever. So, yeah, it will be interesting.
I was going to say one more thing. What I like about it too is for us in the fractional space, the opportunities are limitless. So I'm currently in negotiations with a client that happens to be one of the founders is in Indonesia and one of the founders is in Spain. And so I would have never even stumbled upon this opportunity had I just been focused on full-time employment in the States. So I love that. I love how it's making the world smaller. The talent pool is larger. And always just a piece of advice I would give the fractional executives listening to this or people thinking about going into it is to have that abundance mindset. There is plenty to go around. And while I did say feast or famine at the beginning, there's still quite a bit of work to go around. And it just seems like somebody's always calling me to bring me into a project, or there's always somebody you can call on to say, hey, I'm looking for referrals. If you have that abundance mindset, it's going to take you far.
So in terms of your clients, how many are outside of the US? Do you have any outside the US, or is it in states all over?
Everyone right now is in the States, but like I said, I'm hopeful. Maybe when this airs, I'll have signed this client that's across the pond.
And Brooke, before we close the show, what is your number one piece of advice for any marketer looking to switch into this portfolio career?
I would say number one, set boundaries in the beginning and stick to them. Your calendar will start to run you if you are not careful. I deliberately block out my calendar every morning for an hour and a half that is just solely dedicated on work. What do I need to do to get done today? I use that time to be on LinkedIn, things like that. I also do not take meetings on Fridays. And that is not because I want to have a 3-day weekend. That is because I actually need time to do the work. I need to sit and think and get things done. And so in the beginning, I didn't stick to those boundaries, and it took a toll on me. And now I am diligent. So set boundaries and stick to them. This is very ticky tacky, but I also do not get put on clients' email servers. Think about what your boundaries are that you need to set so that you can have a nice routine and you're not ending up being run by your calendar.
And that's probably a good point to close this show. If you've been listening or watching this episode, I hope you found value from the discussion and have been inspired by Brooke's journey. In our next episode, I'll be speaking to another fractional leader from another part of the world, so stay tuned for that. Brooke, thank you again for sharing your perspectives. I've really enjoyed the show and listening to your perspective from the US, and I wish you the very best of luck with your future journey.
Thank you so much.